Hi, I'm Rhonda Scher, and I am the host of Unleashing LinkedIn. And today, our guest is Gregory Joseph, and you are on Society Bites Radio. I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Gregory Joseph. Gregory is somebody that I recently got to know because of my interest in face reading. And Gregory is often referred to as the healer of healers and transformational mentor. He's a highly sought after author, healer, and works with families and individuals just like you. He was taught in the mystical Eastern philosophies, and Greg realized that people in the West would have help with their healing modalities. And that's how he came to understand and discover the science of face reading, which is what we're going to talk about today. Face reading explores the phenomena of your thoughts that create the muscle. I'll let Greg explain it, but it's really the musculature of your face. And he is really, really awesome at this skill. So we're going to just jump right in and say hi to Greg. Greg, I am so happy you're able to join me today. How are you?
I'm very well, and it's good to be here, Rhonda.
Thanks. We've had a lot of fun, you and I, talking about face reading. And I know you have a little bit of a backstory in terms of how you came to do it. In the couple of minutes, can you just tell us a little bit about what qualifies you to do the face reading and how you came to become a face reader?
Sure. I was at one of our usual spiritual retreats, and I met a young lady who was the protege of Dr. Robert Whiteside, who was a very famous fellow in personology, which is the study of human behavior through physical attributes. His main focus was the face. And I studied under Kellyanne Gage for several years, realizing that, wow, this was a great way for people to become self-aware, which is one of the big precepts of spiritual healing, in such a way that they can actually correspond and communicate with other people in a way that creates a highly productive and very peaceful kind of conversation. So
How do people? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What I was going to ask you is, because I know you have a backstory with this in terms of how you used it in your own construction industry, right?
Oh yeah, I was kind of fun. I was just learning face reading. I'd actually been with her about a little over a year, and I went back to New York. I was living in Colorado at the time to visit some friends, and they showed me this beautiful space where they were going to build themselves a house. And I said, well, gee, you never know. Guess what I do for a living? They'd hired a builder. He didn't show up, so I wound up actually staying there to build his house. Then what happened was there was a fellow in town that took interest in the house and wanted to speak to me about building his home. And I thought, well, gee, this is a very expensive custom home, and I'm living out of state. The chances of getting this contract weren't that good. So I thought, well, they kept badgering me, and I said, well, set up a meeting. So when we set up the meeting, I realized very quickly that he was very affable and very friendly and easy to get along with. And his wife was somebody who took some time to what we call discerning. And so for her, it was important for me to keep a good distance from her so she would be comfortable. For him, it was very important for me to be close to him and act like he was my best friend.
How could you tell? What were the things that led you to know this information? Because I can imagine for our listeners that if they knew a few things that could give them the kind of information you're sharing, this could give them such a competitive advantage. So what was it that got you to know he was affable and how she was?
Oh, this is just what you said, too. It's once you know these things, you realize that you can very easily not upset their natural traits or their natural outward expression. He had this kind of ruddy, rough texture skin, which we call high insulation, which for somebody like him, he needs to then have somebody that's close. You joke with him, you talk right away, sit right next to him, and he feels really comfortable. Literally, if I'd stayed far away from him, he'd begin to wonder what's wrong, what's going on? Why isn't this person opening up and being friendly with me? And he would start registering no's. So I sat right next to him. He was perfectly fine with that. We exchanged information very easily, very fluently. She
So
was,
if somebody knew that, sorry, I didn't mean
yeah,
to interrupt, but if
it's
somebody
okay.
knew that and they could identify that type of skin, that would give
Yes,
them an indication whether they should be close or far away, which gives them a real competitive advantage in any business situation. Is that true?
absolutely. Well, think about it with her, for example. Her comfort range was about 2.5 arm lengths away. So I made sure I stayed way away from her, and I even averted her eyes.
How
It
did you
just,
know
I
to
did
do that? What was it
because
about her?
she had this incredibly porcelain smooth skin, and she also had another trait called discerning, which her eyebrows, you tell from the eyebrows, they were set quite high on her head, which means she has to take some time to allow you into her space. And so I allowed her that time by addressing, primarily by addressing him, and only addressing her when she asked.
Wow. And because you had this advantage, what happened for you in this particular transaction knowing that? And were there other factors?
Oh, well, there's many factors, of course, to look into in face reading, but those are the two primary. I mean, this is one of the most important traits. You don't want to start registering no's in the back of their minds right away. So what you want to do is have this create an open conversation. We spoke for about 2 hours, and in that 2 hour time, they had asked me to then build their house, which was quite extraordinary. I haven't even given them a price yet.
Wow.
Yeah, they were sold. So I wound up then moving back to upstate New York. And what I did then was I wound up staying there and building several homes.
And how has face reading helped to grow your business? And also, how can it be taught to others so that they can use it in their business to actually, give them an advantage? Because what I know about face reading is it's a way to see somebody the way they see themselves. Is that true?
Yes, this is really important. One of the things I'm really glad you brought that up because what happens is it's so important that you absolutely know your own face. So you know your own traits. So, for example, if my face was way more ruddy than this fellow's face, I would want to be sure that I still kept a little bit of a distance. Do you see? Because I would be even more friendly, more apt to get right up in his face than he would naturally be comfortable with. So it's all relative to your own knowing of your own self, who is in front of you. So that's the real place to start. When you start with yourself, understand your own traits, what you're most strong in, what you're least strong in, and then being respectful of that trait in the other person by matching that trait with them or coming in at a lesser value.
So, to go back to what you said originally, it was you need to be able to understand your own face or to be able to read your own face. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the place to start.
So, tell me a couple of situations, one or two, where if somebody were to learn the basics of face reading, how could it help them in business? What kind of professions could this help? And what are some of the things that you would teach people? Because we've talked about this before of how this could be a huge advantage.
Sure. For example, let's say you're even in business, you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner and you need to hire somebody. And you want somebody who is able to take in a lot of facts, who's comfortable being by themselves. So you would want to find somebody who has the trait called high analytical, somebody who's perfectly content to be with facts and figures and work sometimes long hours if you want them to, but they're so interested in acquiring facts and putting those facts into programs that then, of course, are good for the company. For example, an engineer has to collect a lot of facts, has to have a lot of knowledge. So if you're hiring somebody as an engineer's position, wouldn't you want someone, A, who could comprehend facts quickly and accumulate a lot of facts in order to create, for example, and even in construction, to create a structure that is sound and economical and ergonomical. So when you put all of those things together, you want somebody who can have a deep understanding, collect all of the facts and put it together. So it'd be great to be able to know who to hire for a job like this. That's one way
So,
it helps in business.
so with that particular description, and I know we're really generalizing here, but let's
Mhm.
say you were hiring an engineer. What would some of the traits be that you would look for to fit that position if you were using face reading?
Sure. I'd look for a person whose eyelids were literally disappeared up into their head. Like you don't see any eyelids at all. These are people who are high analytical. They need a lot of information. I would look somebody whose basic structure of their face, some genetic disposition we have to be aware of, but a person whose face is taller than wide. This is a person who requires a lot of information in order to be confident about what they're doing. I'd also look for somebody who has a more slanted forehead, like it slopes backward, it's not straight up and down. So this is a person, once they collect all of this information, they can put it to use quickly. They can assimilate this information very quickly. So those would be three of the traits I'd look for right off the bat for an engineer.
That is absolutely fascinating. Do you have any successful stories? I think you had told me once about maybe it was a car dealership. I'm not sure, but places, success stories of people that you've worked with that have taken face reading and used it to basically grow their business. Do you have some success stories you could share?
Sure, I have one. I did a presentation at a car dealership, and they brought in most of their not all of them, but most of their salespeople to listen in. And what I discovered, we set it up a little bit wrong because we had it was during working hours, and they could see down in the showroom when people walked in. So some of the salespeople were jumping up and trying to do two things at once: learn what I was teaching them and go sell a car. So, but by the traits, I could see who was going to stay in the room and who wasn't. So it was kind of interesting. We started out with like 13 people, and we wound up with four because the dealership became kind of busy. But some of the fellows left simply because they just didn't think that this worked. It's interesting. The four that stayed became the top salesmen in the company. That's
Wow.
They were really interested. They understood it. They stayed with it. They called me later. I spoke with them several times. I did some individual work with them to help them to understand themselves. Again, that is so key, understanding yourself so you know where you are relative to the person in front of you.
So, face reading can really give you an advantage in a lot of ways that doesn't take advantage of somebody, is what I'm understanding. Yes?
Yeah, this is about your outward expression, not the person. You're not reading somebody's mind. You're simply looking at the way that they express themselves and avoid offending that mode of expression. Make sense?
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So, for example, people that are in sales, and we're very much now in a virtual world where we're seeing people on Zoom more than in a face-to-face place, correct?
Yes.
So when you're on Zoom with somebody and you're looking at them, what are some of the things that somebody that understood face reading at a very basic level would be able to understand about the person that they're having that conversation with that without the skill of face reading, they would not know?
Sure. Some really basic things. For example, what type of information to deliver to them? Are they emotional? Are they highly emotional? Or do they withhold emotions? Are they interested in, the soft leather and the convertible top and the wind going through their hair? Or are they interested in the horsepower and how much it costs? So it would be really, really helpful to know, for example, if you're looking at somebody, if their main concern is how much bang for the buck, are they